Hello, this is Brendan Osborne with Group Delta. This is my presentation on nuclear renaissance, changing nuclear landscapes abroad. To begin, we have a world map showing the concentration of nuclear power sites in the United States, Europe, and East Asia. We won't be looking at the United States during this presentation, but we will see how we can anticipate seeing more red dots in the India and China regions in years to come. We'll take a look at world energy production metrics and emerging nuclear countries. We'll move on to Japan and the status of their nuclear industry following the Fukushima accident. We'll look at France as a model country for nuclear power, and we'll move on to Germany's energy transition. We'll look at how Russia, China, and South Korea are expanding their nuclear capacities as well as those of other countries. And we'll take a look at why India's nuclear fleet has largely been constructed by other countries, as well as the beginning of their own domestic production. Lastly, we'll look at the repositories being built in Finland and Sweden. We see here a comparison of the operating capacity of the world's nuclear leaders. We see the United States has the most reactors with 100, and France in second with 58. And 447 reactors operating worldwide generate roughly 11% of the global electricity supply. We have some other graphical representations of the leading nuclear capacities worldwide. In addition to the operating reactors, there are 15 under construction, 168 planned, and 345 proposed. While this presentation focuses primarily on the generating powerhouses of the world, it's important to note that there are several smaller countries looking to either develop or expand their own nuclear power programs. Despite this, the largest contributions to the global generating capacity will continue to come from countries who have already well established their nuclear sectors. Japan is the first nation we'll take a closer look at. For each country, we'll see the number of reactors operable, under construction, planned, and proposed at the top of the page. As a result of the Fukushima accident, Japan's nuclear generating capability has largely been diminished, as the majority of their reactor fleet was forced to shut down after the tsunami. Where Japan once generated 1/3 of its total energy production from nuclear power, today just 3 operable plants generate a fraction of that number. The rest of the fleet is awaiting restart approval for reasons ranging from but not limited to safety inspections pending and under review, court injunctions, and engineering upgrades. We see some of the engineering upgrades taking place in the form of the tsunami wall, with a price tag of nearly $4 billion. Before returning to power, reactor sites must pass stress tests in which tsunamis, earthquakes, and loss of power scenarios are simulated using a reactor at full power with full used fuel ponds. Prior to 2011, we see a push for self-sufficiency in the island nation of Japan, their work towards a closed fuel cycle, and the development of their fast breeder reactor technology. Despite the meltdowns at the Fukushima plant following the tsunami, Japan has continued development of their nuclear program. Immediately following the accident, the controlling government party actually lost office after trying to make a move away from nuclear power. We see here construction of Japan's new Generation 3 and 3+ reactors, one of which has been proposed for the Comanche Peak site in Texas. Japan hopes to return to their pre-2011 nuclear capacity by the year 2030. France. France is the world's poster child for nuclear power. This nation contains half as many reactor plants as the United States in a nation roughly the size of Texas. From their 58 nuclear power plants, they generate roughly 3/4 of their national electricity supply, and this results in them having the cheapest electricity in the European Union. This has resulted in dramatic reductions in CO2 emissions, and France's spent fuel recycling policy results in minimal fuel waste. We can see the amount of waste that is generated by a standard family in a 20-year period. France. France is the world's poster child for nuclear power. This nation contains half as many reactor plants as the United States in a nation roughly the size of Texas. From their 58 nuclear power plants, they generate roughly 3/4 of their national electricity supply, and this results in them having the cheapest electricity in the European Union. This has resulted in dramatic reductions in CO2 emissions, We see pictures here of the new EPR being built at the Flamanville site in France. Unfortunately, French energy officials are anticipating a reduction in nuclear's share of energy production in the coming years as the nation turns more to renewables. Next, we'll take a look at France's neighbor to the east, Germany, where we see that they have 0 reactors planned, under construction, or proposed. In fact, of the nation's 17 operable reactors, only 8 are currently online, and the rest are scheduled to be shut down by the end of 2022. Germany's decision to move away from nuclear power has come as a result of the Fukushima accident, as well as Siemens' decision to withdraw from the nuclear industry. Germany will be making its Energiewende, or energy policy transition, from nuclear power to renewable energy sources in the coming years. However, they still rely heavily on coal power production. Japan is the first nation we'll take a closer look at. For each country, we'll see. But this transition is coming with a heavy price tag and is already being felt by families in the form of a new sustainability surcharge tax. Russia. Russia derives roughly 1/5 of their total energy production from nuclear power, and currently they rely heavily on gas. And France's spent fuel recycling policy results in minimal fuel waste. We can see the amount of waste that is generated by a standard family in a 20-year period. We see a roadmap for the coming construction of new nuclear power plants that will replace the aging fleet in a roughly 1-for-1 swap that will not dramatically increase the nuclear generating capacity. Nuclear power company Rosatom espouses the socioeconomic benefits of investing in nuclear power, while national gas supplier Gazprom intends to move away from domestic electricity production in favor of exporting gas supplies to Western Europe at 5 times the profit. Russia has no intention of developing a solar or wind power base. Their sites are aimed on nuclear power. What Russia is trying to accomplish right now is the development of the next generation of reactors that will spur their nuclear expansion in coming years. Russia is working towards a closed fuel cycle that minimizes radioactive waste by reprocessing used fuel. Mixed oxide fuel technology allows for the use of multiple fuel materials in the same reactor core. And Russia has placed an emphasis on their sodium-cooled fast reactor technology development, while also continuing to take a look at heavy metal coolant technology. Additionally, Russia has laid the hole for their first 200-megawatt floating nuclear power plant. What Russia is trying to accomplish right now is the development of the next generation of reactors that will spur. We have some other graphical representations of the leading nuclear capacities worldwide. In addition to the operating reactors, there are 15 under construction, 168 planned, and 345. We see plans for construction of their pressurized water reactor in China, as well as the Generation 3 upgraded version for Belarus. 29 other reactors are contracted and planned for other countries, including the Generation 2 pressurized water reactor, the Generation 3, and the Generation 3 Plus pressurized water reactor. And what these additional proposals demonstrate is that smaller countries are looking to the nuclear powerhouses of the world to help them develop their own domestic nuclear power programs. Next, we'll take a look at energy production giant China, which surpassed the United States in 2011 to become the world leader in total energy production capacity. Now we can see that China has huge plans for developing their nuclear sector, planning to double and then triple their nuclear capacity. Now for a country who currently only generates roughly 1% of their power from nuclear sources, this is a rise to only 7%. And that might seem small, but for a country who currently generates 1/5 of the total world energy production alone, 73% of which comes from fossil fuels, that means great things for reducing CO2 emissions. And we'll take a look at the reactor technology for the coming Chinese nuclear fleet. Now, in the last few decades, China has acquired much of its reactor technology from the United States, Canada, and France. Now, they've made their own modifications and upgrades, which have largely made this reactor technology Chinese intellectual property. Now, from this, they've developed their own Generation 3 reactor, the Hulong 1, which they will be building one for the United Kingdom in the coming years. Now, China is also helping to construct and finance two EPR designs for the United Kingdom, of which they will also maintain a share of ownership in. France. France is the world's poster child for nuclear power. We see a variety of designs, Chinese both old and new, Canadian Generation 2 reactor technology, again the Hulong 1, and American Westinghouse technology as well. We have other countries here that China is in talks with to build new power stations, as well as Kazakhstan, who they're looking to develop a fuel station for. We'll now move across the Yellow Sea to take a look at South Korea, who has had an exceptional safety record in nuclear power thus far. We can see on this map here, it is a few years old, but we can see the start of operation, date of operating reactors, and their megawatt capacity. Now as we move over here, we see the new 1400 megawatt reactors planned for 2016 and beyond at two different sites, as well as a 1500 megawatt design. South Korea currently generates 1/3 of its total energy production from nuclear power, with intentions of expanding this number to 70% by 2029. South Korea's 1400 megawatt reactor is a Generation 3 advanced pressurized water reactor, and the first one was brought online earlier this year. There are 3 more under construction, with 4 units planned, and its Generation 3 Plus successor is in its final stages of development. In fact, of the nation's 17 operable reactors, only 8 are currently online, and the rest are scheduled to be shut down by the end of 2022. Russia has no intention of developing a solar or wind power base. Their sites are aimed on nuclear power. Unlike Russia, South Korea has developed their ability to use a mixed fuel supply in their reactor cores. The new Generation 3 Plus design will yield a reactor with safety levels an order of magnitude higher than its predecessor, mostly due to increased redundancy of emergency systems. Lastly, we take a look at India's nuclear power industry, which only generates a mere 3.5% of the country's total energy supply. Currently, they rely largely on coal supplies. However, their reserves are limited. We see that they have ambitious goals for the future of their nuclear power program. Like Russia and Japan, India has placed an emphasis on their fast reactor technology, but uniquely to India, they have also developed their expertise in the thorium fuel cycle. And 447 reactors operating worldwide generate roughly 11% of the global electricity supply. The diversity in India's nuclear fleet is a result of them being a non-signatory of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which excluded them from international trade in nuclear materials and fuels for the past 3 decades. Before returning to power, reactor sites must pass stress tests in which tsunamis, earthquakes, and loss of power scenarios are simulated using a reactor at full power with full used fuel ponds. Russia is working towards a closed fuel cycle that minimizes radioactive waste by reprocessing used fuel. Because of the limited supply of domestic fuel supplies, these plants must run at a lower capacity. Meanwhile, the country is dealing with a coal shortage, as well as previously mentioned. Over the last few years, India has gained support from the United States, Canada, and France to join the Nuclear Suppliers Group, which requires a unanimous decision from all 48 members for admittance. The diversity in India's nuclear fleet is a result of them being a non-signatory of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which excluded them from international trade in nuclear materials and fuels for the past 3 decades. As a result, India will continue to import reactor plant technology, as well as simultaneously opening up several new domestic uranium mines. India also holds 13% of the world supply of thorium, which it intends to use down the road for a self-sustaining fleet of advanced heavy water breeder reactors. Because of the limited supply of domestic fuel supplies, these plants must run at a lower capacity. Meanwhile, the country is dealing with a coal shortage, as well as previously mentioned. Additionally, Russia has laid the hole for their first 200 megawatt floating nuclear power plant. Real quick, I wanted to take a look at Finland and Sweden here. We see that nuclear power comprises a large portion of their national power supplies. But more importantly, they are finding solutions to questions that the United States is still looking for answers for. Both nations are currently developing spent fuel and waste material repositories at existing plants that will store a combined tonnage of 18,500 tons worth of nuclear waste. This waste will be stored roughly 1/3 of a mile underground in a network of tunnels. We can see some artists' renditions of the proposed sites. These facilities are expected to start operation by 2030, and once sealed, are expected to safely house the radioactive waste for several 100,000 years. Now to recap, we took a closer look at the nuclear industry of Japan, France, Germany, Russia, China, South Korea, and India. And we took a look at the spent fuel repositories being proposed for Finland and Sweden. And we will talk about common themes in our conclusion section. So I believe what we've seen as far as nuclear renaissance is concerned outside of the United States is that nuclear power may be waning in Western Europe. We see France isn't building as many power plants as they used to. You see more of a move towards renewable energies. Germany is getting out of the nuclear power game. You see Spain turning more towards renewables, and other countries just not eager to start new construction at this time. However, in Eastern Europe, Russia is greatly expanding their research and technology base. They're building nuclear plants for many other countries in Eastern Europe, in Asia, and even Africa as well. Meanwhile, in Asia, we see energy giant China looking to greatly expand their nuclear energy generating capacity. India, whose energy demands are expected to increase dramatically in the coming decades, looking to increase their domestic nuclear energy production. South Korea continuing to develop their technology, and even Japan is still looking towards nuclear power and developing their own new reactors. Because of the limited supply of domestic fuel supplies, these plants must run at a lower capacity. Meanwhile, the country is dealing with a coal shortage, as well as previously mentioned. It's kind of funny that you see Russia building plants for China, China building plants for India, Russia building plants for India, but really those two, Russia and China, looking to build plants for countries all across Europe and Asia, and even, like we said, Egypt. And you have South Korea as well currently building 4 plants for the United Arab Emirates. Again, I think this is important because you have smaller countries looking to gain from the benefits of nuclear power, but they don't have the technology at home to get there. So they're looking to the world leaders, both as an example in safety, but also to help with the development of their own technology. Nextly, we couldn't get into it too terribly much. I know there's a lot of information during this presentation, but countries like Russia and China and India, they're doing a lot of research into different types of fast fast reactors and breeder reactors and advanced heavy water reactors. In fact, of the nation's 17 operable reactors, only 8 are currently online, and the rest are scheduled to be shut down by the end of 2022. Now, from this, they've developed their own Generation 3 reactor, the Hulong 1, which they will be building one for the United Kingdom in the coming years. Japan is the first nation we'll take a closer look at. For each country, we'll see the number of reactors operable. Despite the meltdowns at the Fukushima plant following the tsunami, Japan has continued development of their nuclear program. Japan, however, has its sights set on a return to nuclear power, and I think that this speaks volumes for the international nuclear community. You did see Germany choosing to leave behind nuclear power, but other countries are still, they have a vested interest in nuclear power and the safety of their industries for years to come. Well, that's all we have, guys. Thanks for watching.